Come to me, all you who are heavily burdened. It really does help when you're preparing a homily if the readings are relevant. And today they are, because so many people do feel heavily burdened by fear, financial insecurity, loneliness, and grief. While some societies creep back towards what once seemed normal, others feel abandoned as the pandemic sweeps on. In the Philippines, as everywhere in the world, poor people and minorities carry the heaviest burden. Physical distancing and isolation are not possible when a family of 8 in one room is separated from their neighbours by a wall of cardboard or torn plastic. In every country, people feel weighed down. Circumstances vary, but our encounter with coronavirus and its unimaginable death toll has rammed home to us that we are interconnected, interdependent, and we are not controllers of the earth. But I wonder if for you, as for me, this pandemic feels even more overwhelming because of what is happening in our current context. The ferocity of bushfires, droughts, floods, typhoons, the melting ice cap warn us that we face a challenge that no vaccine can conquer. Frankly, climate change is deeply scary. Young people urge us to rethink our way of living, to recognise that we belong to Mother Earth, our common home. She is not ours to plunder. Theologians tell us that the extinction of every species destroys another small revelation of God. The Corona pause button that has shut down our world demands that we recognise our interconnectedness, that we rethink priorities, and that we allow our hearts and minds and actions to be changed. Actually, I find it hard not to feel overwhelmed. And it's from that place that I've meditated on these readings. The prophet Zechariah, writing about 500 years before Jesus, was encouraging his people who felt overwhelmed after the exile because they faced rebuilding their temple, a huge task. He promised them a new style of leader, riding on a donkey, not on an army tank, and using his power in humility and simplicity to bring peace to the whole earth. We might look around our world and say, if only we had a few more leaders like that. But we can all be leaders in small ways, choosing simplicity, working for peace. And in the second reading, St. Paul assures us that if we do this, we have the Spirit of the risen Christ who will help us to choose well and to put to death expectations and actions that are self-centered. But it's our gospel that speaks most strongly. Come to me, you who are heavy burdened. This reading shows us that Matthew's community was pondering the rich wisdom tradition in the Hebrew scriptures. These wisdom books were written in the last few centuries before the birth of Jesus, and they talk about God using female imagery and see her as guiding them in their journey across the Red Sea, through the desert, welcoming people to the banquet, meeting them in their daily lives, and sitting with them at the city gates, offering them hope and sharing their burden. Wisdom, called Sophia in Greek, is the way they named God as they encountered her in the struggles of their everyday lives. Her message of hope called them to a new way of living. Like us, the early Christians had good reason to feel overwhelmed. They thought their dream had ended when Jesus was brutally murdered by the religious and political authorities of his time. But the women and men who followed him, after their initial turmoil and bereavement, experienced that the God of love and compassion, the one who'd been at the heart of everything Jesus had ever shared with them, had worked something beyond anyone's imagining. Jesus' death was not the end. They came to realize that this man, Jesus, who was their friend, who had shared their burden, celebrated many meals with them, and taught with such wisdom, was more than just a teacher. He was, in a very deep sense, God present with them. And the wisdom text would have helped them to make sense of such a possibility. A few years after Jesus' death and resurrection, St. Paul called Jesus the wisdom of God. And in today's verses, we see that Matthew's community placed wisdom's words on Jesus' lips, so that Jesus could claim wisdom to be wisdom himself. God's wisdom would be with them. They found their burden was shared and not heavy. Strengthened by the Spirit, they could go forward as a community, bound together in hope. Come to me, for I am meek and humble of heart. Well, let's face it, meekness and humility do not get good press in the economic or political world. Yet humility is owning the truth about who we are, that we're gifted, but we're weak, that we're loved, yet so often we fail. With such honest self-knowledge, change is possible. As individuals and families, can we consider the small things each one of us might do, as well as the bigger things we need to do with all people of goodwill? But for example, some might find that the 2 months of non-shopping enables them to contribute to groups advocating climate awareness. Others might help build peace through Caritas International or through Médecins Sans Frontières, or by helping out in their local Vincent de Paul Centre. There could be some others like me who think that it would be good to have a compost bin that reduces your rubbish to the tip. So every one of us, though, can look around us and see the beauty in nature and allow that beauty to convert our hearts. Today's reading is a challenge. Can we have the humility to come as little ones, asking wisdom to help us understand, to change, and to live in a new way? Can we let go of some of the good things to allow a greater good to emerge? As with the early women and men who followed Jesus, wisdom is offering to help carry our burden. Jesus' yoke is more like an arm around our shoulder than something heavy pressing on us. He's a wonderful companion at our side, sharing the burden. Do we dare allow hope into our hearts? As wisdom calls us to trust, to hope, to move beyond confusion and grief, to listen and to change.